Today, we're diving into how flowering plants reproduce. It's a process that gives us all our fruits and seeds. Yep, all flowering plants reproduce sexually, and the end result? The fruits and seeds we see everywhere. So, flowers are more than just pretty. To a biologist, they're the actual sites of sexual reproduction. The two main parts you need to know are the androecium, that's the male part, and the gynecium, the female part. All right, let's start with the male reproductive structure, which is called the stamen. So, what are pollen grains? They're basically the male gametophytes, carrying the male gametes inside. A pollen grain has two layers, a tough outer exine and a thin inner intine. Inside are two important cells.
The exine sporopollenin is incredibly resistant. In fact, it allows pollen to be preserved as fossils for ages.
Okay, we've covered the male parts. Now let's switch over to the female reproductive organ, the pistil. The pistil has three parts: the stigma, which is a landing pad, the slender style, and the basal ovary. And inside that ovary, you'll find the ovules. Each ovule contains the female gametophyte, or embryo sac.
A mature embryo sac is pretty interesting. At maturity, it's typically 8 nucleate and 7-celled.
So here's a question. Since these gametes can't move, how do they actually meet? That's where pollination comes in. Pollination is simply the transfer of pollen from the anther, the male part, to the stigma, the female part. And here you can see exactly what that looks like. Pollen grains landing on the stigma and starting to germinate. Now, there are 3 different types of pollination, depending on where the pollen comes from and where it goes. To make this happen, plants use external agents. These can be abiotic, like wind, or biotic, like animals. So let's recap the key players, the pollen grain and the embryo sac. Pollination is what connects them. So what happens next? Well, once the pollen lands, it sets the stage for something called double fertilization.